Right now, roughly 99% of everything you're doing online is traveling through cables buried at the bottom of the ocean. Here's the contradiction nobody talks about. The internet feels like an invisible cloud, but it's actually a physical empire of glass, steel, and concrete. And a shockingly small number of companies and countries hold the keys to almost all of it. So if the internet is physical, someone has to own it. And the answer splits three ways: the cables, the companies, and the countries. Watch how they collide. Start with the cables. Each one is barely the width of a garden hose, yet it can carry hundreds of terabits per second, enough for entire continents. There are over 500 active submarine cables stretching across the planet, totaling more than 1.4 million kilometers. That's enough fiber to wrap around the Earth over 30 times. Each cable is barely thicker than a garden hose, yet carries a staggering amount of the world's data. Now the companies. For decades, phone carriers built these lines together. Then the tech giants showed up with checkbooks. Laying one of these cables is brutally expensive and slow. A single transoceanic line can cost hundreds of millions of dollars and take years to plan and deploy. Specialized ships spool cable off their decks for weeks, threading it across trenches and volcanic ridges on the seabed. Google alone has a stake in more than 30 submarine cables. The company you Google is quite literally wired into the seafloor beneath you. But here's where it gets wild, because the map of who owns these lines is now a map of global power. And that changes everything. For decades, cables were owned by consortiums of telecom carriers. But that changed dramatically. Today, the biggest names funding new cables aren't phone companies, they're the tech giants. Google, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft now have ownership stakes in a huge share of new transoceanic capacity. Cooling these machines takes so much power that some data centers use as much electricity as a small city. Why would a search company build ocean cables? Because owning the infrastructure means they control their own speed, cost, and reliability. When you load a video or open an app, your data often rides on hardware owned by the very company serving you. The middleman is disappearing. Type a name, and in milliseconds it's translated into numbers and routed halfway across the planet. Where a cable lands is a matter of national security. Governments decide who gets a landing license, and they can block projects they see as a threat. Some cable routes have been rerouted or cancelled entirely over geopolitical fears about who might tap the data flowing through them. The wildest part is coming. The rules of the entire internet are decided by an organization most people have never heard of. The Red Sea and the Strait of Malacca are two of these critical bottlenecks. In early 2024, cable cuts in the Red Sea disrupted a significant portion of traffic between Europe and Asia. A few damaged lines in one narrow corridor slowed the internet for millions. Type any address and a hidden system instantly translates those words into numbers so machines across the planet can find each other. Because even if you own the cable, your website is invisible without an address the world agrees on. Every domain name relies on the DNS, the internet's phone book, which is anchored by a set of root servers. This entire naming system is coordinated by a non-profit called ICANN. No single country owns it, but the coordination it provides is what keeps the internet unified instead of splintering. Change who controls that phone book, and you could rename or erase entire chunks of the internet overnight. This is exactly why some countries are building their own splinternets. Nations have tested cutting themselves off from the global network to run a domestic internet under total government control. If that spreads, the single global internet we take for granted could fracture into rival zones. So no single king rules the internet. Instead, power is split across three overlapping layers of control. Companies own the physical cables. Countries control where those cables land and who's allowed to connect. And coordination bodies keep the addresses working. Remove any one layer, and the whole system either stalls or fractures apart. The internet isn't a single thing you can buy. It's a fragile treaty between rivals who all need each other. And that balance is shifting fast. As big tech pours billions into private cables, more of the internet's backbone is falling under corporate ownership than ever before. The question isn't just who owns it today, it's who's quietly buying it up for tomorrow. So next time someone says your data lives in the cloud, remember, it's really lying in the dark, at the bottom of the sea. Nobody owns the whole internet, it's held together by cables, countries, and companies that can't afford to let it break.